We're coming, and we ain't backing down.
We don't need a bunch of cats in here looking in the mirror.
Everybody do your job. You understand that?
Hey, will you shut up?
I'm bitterly disappointed with the officiating today.
Guys being dudes.
And they run through our like through a tin horn, man.
Thank you, Lee. Welcome to week 0. We call it a soft launch here. Do we not? Every podcast is somebody's first, and I think that's important to remember as we enter into what's kind of sort of the college football season in full. I'm your host, one of your hosts, Richard Johnson. Alex Kirshner.
Hello.
How are you today?
Doing great. Excited for some live action. Get some pads on, metaphorically speaking. It's going to be great.
Stephen Godfrey, have you finished install yet?
Ireland. No, of course not. Of course not. It's week 0. I didn't finish reading every preview mag, but we'll be fine.
If we were a team, we would get wiped out in week 0 because we're throwing our preseason prep together still.
Well, I will say this. Look, I will say this. So I use week 0 to make sure everything at the at-home setup is right. I put the 3 TVs up. I make sure, like last year the modem was really far away from the TV in my previous apartment. I had to make sure we had a 50-foot Ethernet cord, et cetera, et cetera. This year we are in a new apartment again after moving in May. So I got to make sure everything's up and that we're ready to play ball when we kick off for real next Thursday in 10-ish days. So week 0 is very instructive for me to make sure the bells and whistles are okay. It's like we're playing an FCS opponent.
Speaking of playing FCS opponents, this is actually an impromptu reminder that I'm remembering that I have not talked about on the show in a few weeks. We're doing the FCS upset draft. We obviously had the episode here on the free feed weeks ago. If you have not put your picks in yet, at last check, we had like 600 or 700 entries at patreon.com/SCD. You can play by picking 3 FCS teams to beat FBS teams. And if you win, if you're one of the top scorers, there's details on the site. You can win a home field apparel gift towards the end of this season if you have one of the best scores. That's at patreon.com/SCD. It's scroll down a bit or search for it. It's the FCS upset draft. We've tweeted the link a few times. One of my favorite games. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of actual football games this weekend. Not a lot, 7 or 8, maybe 10. It's kind of, like Richard says, the soft launch of the season. A thing that only college football really has, which is cool. And I guess that means it's time for us to hurry it up here and wrap up conference preview season under the wire.
Is this our last one?
This is our last one. We've got 2 today. We've got the Big Ten and the MAC. We kind of do 1 P5, 1 G5 per week because otherwise, I don't know, we'd be previewing conferences for 10 weeks if we were doing just 1 FBS conference a week. I don't know. Maybe we'll think about next year what the format is. But a quick news roundup before we get into on-field conference previews. Oregon kicking Big Ten tires, according to Brett McMurphy. I think that this is really not Oregon proper. I think this is Phil Knight reading between the lines. I think this is the founder of Nike who is putting out feelers for Oregon. That's my assessment of it.
Thank you, Alex, for I don't think expounding the record or correcting the record is the right term because I'm sure Brett's reporting is sound. I'm trying to find the literal text of what Brett said because it's actually okay. The quote from Brett McMurphy's tweet is exactly: Oregon initiated preliminary discussions in Chicago with Big Ten to determine if Ducks are compatible in the Big Ten. Source told the Action Network. Outgoing Oregon President Michael Schill, AD Rob Mullins, and Big Commissioner Kevin Warren were not involved in any discussions in Chicago, another source said. So that is the direct reporting of Brett McMurphy of the Action Network. Okay, folks, if your school is not in the SEC or currently in the Big Ten, and they are a Power 5, it is a significantly informed, good bet, if you were to make it, that somebody reached out to the Big Ten in the last, 90 days? since I
Yeah,
guess 30 days.
certainly over the course of the last 2 months. Yeah.
Somebody reached out. All right. They just did. Obviously Oregon is the one that gets the big one, all that kind of stuff. The compatibility thing, I think people may be kind of sleeping on. Like there's like Kevin Warren told me there's this like system that they have that they plug in every school that it would, that kind of reaches out or what have you to, and that's where the compatibility thing comes from. The Big Ten like actually has kind of think it like I guess a spreadsheet is how you sort of say it, but I'm sure it's fancier than that. That they plug in like everything about your school, like all the demographic information, all the academic information, all that stuff. And they see how do you line up percentile wise with the rest of the league. So that's where the compatibility stuff comes from. Somebody from Oregon called and was like, sup, you up.
I don't just think it's somebody. I think it's
Hey,
somebody.
I'm in town.
I think, and Godfrey, I'm curious what you think of this.
Hey, I'm
I
in
think
town.
it's somebody calling at the behest of Phil Knight. That's informed by a couple of things. One, nobody's really in charge at Oregon right now. They have a lame duck president. His name's Michael Shale. He's going to Northwestern. Two,
Interesting choice.
I think that Phil, and I base this in large part off of reporting from John Canzano, who I think is one of the couple of really trustworthy Pac-12 football reporters. I think Phil, and John's been reporting on this for a few weeks, so credit to him. I think Phil is pretty focused on the Big Ten.
Yes.
And so you add president who's not really going to be emboldened to make big decisions right now anyway, with the fact that it's the money. And like Brett's report says, hey, like Oregon initiated this meeting, but it wasn't the president and it wasn't the AD. I don't think it was Dan Lanning either. It's the money. It's the money.
I like the idea of Dan just dipping out of practice before the Georgia game. And it's just like, you know what? I'm going to go hobnob in Chicago for a hot minute. I like that idea. As if there would be anyone less qualified.
It's the money. Oregon's money wants to be in the Big Ten.
So, of course, it's the money. Does anyone else read the timing of this as a little bit kind of sad? Like we were doing this jazz a month ago, and now we're just on the cusp of actual football. And
well, think about why Oregon would leak this now, assuming it's someone in the money camp. Because the Pac-12 is going into media rights negotiations, and Oregon probably wants to get a favorable outcome for Oregon.
Sure, but it's exactly what we've explained it to be. And I'll transition you over, Alex, to your next topic. Although I am not the transition king. A lot of what happened in the news this week, it can be easily misinterpreted if you don't bear down and look at what was actually said and the context. So no, Oregon did not fly directly into Big Ten headquarters and discuss expansion directly. That did not happen. But much like this other subject that I'm trying to bridge you into here, Alex, with Kevin Warren, it's not really the way it sounds or reads on Twitter, which is kind of a leitmotif of the year.
Yeah, I think so. The big thing that went around this week was that Kevin Warren says he sees the Big Ten at 20 teams, and that was
the headline.
Wants to be involved in conversations, was the way he put it, about paying players directly. I do think that Kevin Warren probably sees some version of like Big Ten destiny, where the Big Ten keeps growing, and I think like a lot of people see that. That's not a particularly original insight on his or anybody's part,
right?
But the thing that to me was most misleading on Twitter this week was this idea that the Big Ten suddenly wants to be like a market leader in the compensating of athletes, which I think is not it.
So I
would disagree with that assessment.
But before before we do that, we have a problem here, which is, and I hate to do journalism 101. We do enough of that on our specialty shows, but would you see a transcript of a live interview, which is what Bryant Gumbel, and it was HBO's Real Sports, conducted with Warren? The context of an answer to a Q&A format, when you isolate one of those statements, is going to look different. It's going to look probably more declarative than it actually means to be. So Gumbel was basically throwing out open-ended questions to sort of gauge the whole piece was about sort of the aspirations, the manifest destiny of the Big Ten. All right. And this guy, Kevin Warren, who's come in, that was the gist of it.
I have not seen the piece. Also,
I saw the transcripts and the clips in question. This is all fairly standard stuff that you would do, especially during a television interview, because you're trying to gauge someone's personality. So you're.
Can anybody tell me? Can you tell me when it was? Because this is important.
Oh, when the actual interview was conducted?
Yeah, or rough thereabouts.
Probably a week ago.
I would say sometime in the last 10 to 14 days, and we were recording this on the 23rd of August.
Okay, because that explains why he answered the employment question the way he did. If it's post Penn State, it explains the way he answered.
I would say it's almost certainly post that set of headlines, Richard, and what you wrote about at SI. I think this specifically, where it got really badly misinterpreted, was this idea of Big Ten actively shopping to go to 20. That's not what he said. What he did was he took a very smart tactical PR answer to a question that was essentially leading. And that's what journalists do sometimes, especially in those conferences. Like if I was doing a one-on-one podcast interview or like a sit-down interview, and there's not a ton of those on television anymore in the sports world, but Gumbel's one of them. He's trying to push out and figure out how can we frame, how big are the aspirations of the Big Ten? So he was saying stuff like, could you see it at 20? Well, yeah, hypothetically, I could. That doesn't mean I will, or it doesn't mean we are actively expanding. Because it was a Q&A format, it was immediately framed up as, here we go. They're adding X amount of teams. This is going on, which is, honestly, guys, I think this is why the Oregon news got a particular sticky kind of traction. Because if you squint, no one involved in the actual decision-making was involved in whatever happened in that meeting. So we just have to be careful about how we absorb this information. Because I think with expansion and realignment, there's a lot of just wish fulfillment, because I think a lot of college football fans and consumers just want a flurry of activity.
I want a quick straw poll here. Out of the three of us, call it 5 years. Are we in agreement that the Big Ten is going to expand again?
I would
5 years?
say yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure we're on the same page there. Okay, good.
I don't think you can operate with the two as a satellite.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So
Well, I think they could, but I think they
being the
won't.
California schools. Yeah.
I think they could, but they won't.
it's better business not to.
I think they're gonna for a little bit, and
Yes.
then, oh, wow,
Yes.
hey, this is crazy. It's not working.
I think
Okay,
they will
all right.
close the gaps that
Good.
present themselves. Here's the thing. They have a luxury of time. They don't have to do anything at the moment. They feel very good about the position. They feel look, please don't think about this in terms of helmets on the field and the football that you've seen in the last 10 years as you listen to me. But they feel as good as the SEC does about bringing Red River in. They do. One might argue they feel better.
I think they should, by the way.
I do too.
That's just my opinion.
So the other piece of this transcript that was interesting, so there was Brian Gumbel saying, you're at 16 now. Could you foresee 20? Warren says, yeah. So it becomes, Big Ten's expanding right now. The other thing was Gumbel asks, could you foresee paying your athletes? Warren says, yes. Not much news there. I think anyone could foresee that at this point.
So pause real
But
fast, Alex. How else could he have answered that? That's why he said yes.
Couldn't have said no. Couldn't have said
That's
no.
the best.
Yeah.
It's not just about diplomacy. It's also by saying yes, it keeps the most amount of options on the table for the future.
Well,
that's why
he
said yes.
It also positions the Big Ten as being early on this compared to the SEC, which, as we've talked about before, is something the Big Ten cares deeply about, is being seen to be being more pro-athlete than the
Progressive.
SEC. Absolutely.
Progressive.
Anyway, Gumbel says, so could you foresee the day when various Big Ten schools, he names them, are paying their football players, paying their basketball players because they are in revenue-producing sports? And Warren says, those are things that we have to resolve. We have to, so I want to be part of this conversation and will be part of this conversation of what we can do to make this better. Thanks to Ross Dellinger from SI for the transcript. So point is, I don't think that Kevin Warren, much like I don't think he was saying the Big Ten's expanding now, I'd be real careful if anyone wants to read that and think that the Big Ten is suddenly going to dive in and start leading on trying to rapidly pay athletes. I think the Big Ten might wind up being first to that years down the line, but they are going to be as slow as they possibly can. Richard, did you disagree with me about that?
No, I don't think I don't think I knew your context, or did not think I anticipated your context for the situation, of which I now, having heard it in full, do agree.
Anyway, the Big Ten loves all this stuff because they got some big, look how forward thinking, look how aggressive we're being about expansion stuff out of a combined 25 words of answers in a Q&A for Kevin Warren.
Really, to be honest, nothing happened, and it's the two biggest stories of the week leading into the actual season.
Thank
Pretty
heavens.
impressive.
Thank heavens that it is almost the actual season. Week after this, next week, I'm going to be at the Hailgate in the Pittsburgh Football Stadium's parking lots, as it's called now, before Pitt in West Virginia. Can't wait. Going to make that road trip. Speaking of road trips, we've got a new sponsor that we've teased before, I think on a couple of recent shows. It's Nokian Tires. So Nokian makes some of the safest, most eco-friendly tires in the market. It's a Finnish company. They've got a factory in Tennessee. Why'd they open a factory in Tennessee? I think in part to reach the U.S. market. I think in part because Tennessee fans needed a place to gather in mourning on Monday mornings after difficult weekends over the last few years. Nokian basically invented the winter tire, but it's growing on our continent by making market-leading tires that work in all seasons, in all weather. I have some tires from Nokian that I've recently put on my car. They have been fantastic. Richard, I hope that yours are out of your living room now and actually on your girlfriend's car. I don't know.
They thankfully are. Boyfriend of the Year points. Shout out Nokian.
Fantastic.
Feel good. We feel good about our position. This is what you feel good about your position coming out of camp heading into the season. I got my girl new tires. By the way,
You know
I
what
got
every,
my girl new tires.
what every
and
girl
Alex
dreams
didn't-
of in a long-term
and
relationship is new
Alex
tires.
didn't realize. Alex, wait, hold on a second. You, out of anybody, should understand that the functional gifts are the best ones
Bro,
after
you know the first thing I did
a decade of doing this.
when I was dating her, I put her on my cell phone plan, and my in-laws still compliment me on that.
Alex did not realize that tires are it's a pretty penny for a set of 4.
Alex learned how much tires cost.
I think that I have not, since I have rejoined the car game in the last year, I had not bought new tires. And I just, this economy, this inflation is ridiculous.
Uh-huh.
But I know
In this economy.
Nokian tires are very much affordable. And we actually have a way that we can potentially make them more affordable for you. But first, our Nokian road trips of the week. It's week 0. Steven, what's your ideal road trip of the games on the week 0 slate?
Well, this one's easy because I've done it in real life. Not for a football game, but I would love to pair it with one. And that is this weekend's. Gentlemen, did you know this game was sold out in the Sun Bowl? Sold out.
I didn't know that. That's great news.
UTEP versus North Texas, week 0. How about that? Everybody excited about that game?
It's exciting. That's a great atmosphere.
I have driven in my life from Austin, Texas to El Paso in one day. That's definitely an if you know type of road trip. I would encourage you maybe to break it up. But for the purposes of this road trip, let's go from Denton, Texas specifically, which if you're unfamiliar is at the northern end of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in the town of Denton. And let's scoot on down and head to El Paso, the westernmost major city in the state of Texas. That's basically driving Texas. That's basically almost all of Texas. Sorry, my apologies to Beaumont and Tyler. That's a lot of Texas. So I would definitely advise you to break it up. Maybe stop in Hill Country, kind of bang out that last part of the drive before you get to El Paso. But I've said this before on the show. I'll say it again. El Paso, in that area of West Texas, one of the prettiest and most unique and most underrated parts of America to visit.
And also not even close to the southernmost point of Texas. A geographic point.
That's a whole other thing. Yeah. I don't know if
I
you're
used to
familiar
biff
with
that
this.
one. Yeah, I've never been to El Paso. I used to biff that, but it's like one of the more northern parts. It's more central across the state, but it's basically up in New Mexico, very close to Las Cruces as well.
Yes, that is the rivalry. It takes about 45 minutes to get from the campus of UTEP to the campus of New Mexico State.
Richard, where would you be going this week if you were in the road trip business on Friday and Saturday?
I'll be heading down to Atlanta from the famously quick road trip from Brooklyn to Atlanta. I'm heading down to Atlanta for the MEXWAC Challenge, Alabama State and Howard in Atlanta. If you happen to be watching this game on TV, you will see multiple elements from the new Black Panther movie. ESPN's going to be, or Disney, ESPN, etc., going to be running multiple activations, as it were.
That trailer looks so good
around the game. New trailer elements, I believe, never before seen trailer elements. So pay attention to that. I ran into the Celebration Bowls, the guy who runs the Celebration Bowl last week in Charlotte. Had a good conversation, and they are the ones atop the MEAC and SWAC Challenge as well.
Okay. I'm going to Ireland for Nebraska Northwestern. Obviously, I can't drive there. Maybe that kind of moots the point of the ad read, but I believe in honesty in marketing. I'm going to drive to the airport and the car is going to perform great on these tires on the way to the airport. And then it will perform great when I rent a car and put Nokian tires on it in Dublin and drive it around the Irish cities and countryside.
As you do.
As one does. Yeah, as everyone knows that when you get a rental car, you put new tires on it. Now, that would be my ideal road trip of this week. But I'm actually taking one next week to Pittsburgh for the Backyard Brawl. Nokian tires are the perfect companion for these kinds of fall football road trips. You, the SCD listener, are invited to Nokian Tires. That's Nokian with an I and tires with an I.com/SZD. NokianTires.com/SCD. To enter your favorite football journeys of the year. And if you do that, you get a chance to win a set of tires. Can enter your favorite road trip there. You can look at others' trips. Don't just stop at the stadium. Point out where you're eating, where others should go. Make it a fun little internet hub of college football travel. Also helps you find dealers, places to get tires. Thanks to Nokian. We appreciate you.
First sports road trip of my life was basically where you are, Alex. It was Prince William County to Pittsburgh. That was the first sports road trip I ever took. 1991 in LCS.
Invites open. You want to make a late trip to the Backyard Brawl? I'm making good dinner reservations for us and some of our friends. Just saying.
Somebody got to send me up there.
Big Ten preview. Let's do it. From this point forward, we're a realignment-free zone this week. We're going to talk about what's going to happen on the field in college football this year. You might know the game format, but if it's your first podcast, I'm going to read a statement. Richard and Godfrey will say if it is true or false, hot or cold. But instead, they will use two classic Midwestern restaurants. We've got Sbarro, which, as you all know, is headquartered in Columbus, Ohio, and Culver's. Note also, we're going to try to get to every team. We have not done this in every preview. A few teams have missed out. Some people have been annoyed about that. And I actually take that point. We try to focus on, or at least when I'm building these show notes, on like what I think most people will be most interested in. And sometimes that leaves some teams out. It doesn't even just mean all the good teams. It just means what we think will be most interesting. But I could see how it could be a bit deflating if you're listening for your team and we don't talk about them at all. So we're going to trial run it, try to get to every team in some form or another.
better late than never.
Better late than never. We're always evolving. It's never too late to learn, Richard.
We're watching the game film. We're trying to get better week to week. He says in December.
I'm sorry to Cal. There were a few Cal fans. Who weren't happy with me, weren't happy with us after the Pac-12 preview.
Your offense sucks. There.
Okay, glad you said it.
All right, Cal's now been covered.
Bill Musgrave should be put into some sort of correctional facility for coordinators. Y'all did it. Right. Don't blame us.
Let's move to the Big Ten with true or false, Sbarro or Culver's. I think we all agree that Ohio State should not lose more than one game this year, so I'm going to make this more interesting for us. The true or false? Ohio State's defense is going to make a major year one rebound under new coordinator Jim Knowles of Oklahoma State previously, and this is going to be more of an, oh no, they are a terrifying machine Ohio State year, as opposed to a, well, they're good, but Greg Schiano or Kerry Combs is ruining the entire state's morale for the entire year while they go 11-1. Type Ohio State season. And we all know the difference, right? We know how Ohio State's discourse is in these years, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
At this point, I think we're all familiar.
the rhythms of the Ohio State season.
So is it Ohio State, the death machine, or is it Ohio State, the death machine with low fan base morale because their defense keeps breaking open?
I went tasty, hot, airport Ohio pizza. Because it may not take much. You frame this as a comparison. Knowles coming from Kerry Combs. So I don't think it will take much for them to feel better about their defense. That's how I frame this up. And also, I think it's very possible, Richard, I'm going to set you up here, that they build a comfortable lead against Notre Dame. And the defense is going to look even better for it in a big, high-profile, overhyped Week 1 game. So I think, they're going to be feeling great.
I think that Ohio State, first of all, I think that the first time Ohio State like spins the safeties post snap and fucking runs two safeties high, people are going to like lose their minds because that's what they haven't done in, a decade. And there's actually something to the fact that I think they are actually trying to be and already are a little bit more hashtag multiple on defense. If you want Alabama to be knocked off a future perch this season, this is the team to do it. Because, folks, they are going to score a truckload of points. I mean, there is no doubt about it.
Yeah, it barely even demands to be previewed. Like they're going to score so many points.
it's going to be outlandish. I think that may be, and we'll get to it next week, but I think that may be Notre Dame's undoing, because Notre Dame is going to come out here and they're going to try to play Marcus Freeman man defense in your face. It is what it is, man to man. And Jackson Smith-Njigba and Marvin Harrison Jr. are going to have a lot of joy. We'll get to that next week.
How does that work for you if you're down 17 10 minutes in?
I think Notre Dame's going to find out next Saturday night.
Okay, just checking.
But I think that I don't know where the hole is on offense for them, to be honest. I really don't.
And I think they did just lose one of their running backs for the year, and that's sad. And you feel for that player. They're going to find. They still got Travion Henderson. They're going to find 3 more. It's just like it's an endless reservoir.
Hang on, I want to touch on something, because I think we're overlooking a thing here, because we could take this conversation and send it back a year. It's not like the offense was terrible last year. The offense was ridiculous last year.
No, but we did make it a point last year to say, and the year before, 2020, to say, hey, they are running this defense without a Bosa brother or Chase Young.
Right.
And they have been having diminishing returns doing that.
Okay. Well, so this is where I'm going. I think we might not actually be touching the right nerve here, because Michigan did all of the things that annoy the shit out of Ohio State about that Michigan, like, we're going to get big, we're going to smash it, we're going to be. You don't have the ability to wipe that slate clean until the last game of the season. And even if you are scoring a ridiculous 59 points a week, maybe there is some lingering doubt here that they won't be physical enough, or some sort of, BS talk radio term on defense, until they actually get over the hump and beat Michigan again. Get over the hump of losing for the first time in a decade. But
Right.
it's a mental tick. It's a bugaboo. Like I talk to Ohio State fans almost every week, I feel like, and yeah, it's become a thing. So maybe we're not paying enough umbrage to the anger that they feel about losing the game.
I think that when Ohio State has early leads, which is going to be pretty much every week, Jim Knowles is going to do a lot of what he did at Oklahoma State. That is drop people back into coverage. And turns out those are really good players. Try to get pressure with 4. I think that's going to work. Like, Zach Harrison's still there, and he's not quite like a Bosa brother or a Chase Young, but he's good. Taron Vincent's still there. They have a good enough front that this should be pretty easy. Also, I think a player who you should watch for them is the cornerback / safety.
That is the under the radar position that they
have been bad at.
They have to get some gentlemen.
They did.
Back.
They did. And you know what I'm talking about? It's Tanner McAllister, who was really important. Kind of a Swiss Army knife. Like, he played box safety, he played nickel, he played some outside corner, he played some deep safety for Oklahoma State.
He's kind of like Sean Wade. Kind of like a maybe expanded version of Sean Wade.
Yeah, and like, he's going to be there. I think he is going to be, like, we might look at the end of the season and think that Tanner McAllister was one of the more important transfers of the hundreds or thousands or whatever in college football. I just think it's, for those of us who enjoy Ohio State being leaky and their fan base having an existential crisis every week about their defense, even while they win by 24 points, I think we're going to have to find other means of fun this year. I do. I think it's going to be tough.
The under the radar thing to worry about with Ohio State on offense, if there is one, how do they adjust to a post anti-cut block college football? Long story short, they changed the rule about who can cut, where you can cut, and when you can cut. It's going to make it difficult for option teams, but it's also going to make it difficult for a team like Ohio State that wants to run a lot of split zones, where offensive line goes one way, tight end, wing back, H-back, whatever the hell you want to call him, comes back across the formation behind the offensive line, cuts the edge defender, first edge defender on the line of scrimmage. Now, it's a little bit more.
A split zone doesn't work.
Jesus Christ.
There it is.
It's a little more different. Excuse me, a little more difficult, I should say, this year, given the new cut block rules, which essentially means you have to try to cut from the front of the person, which is famously hard to do as the angles are concerned when you're coming from the other side of the formation to block the first end man edge defender on the line of scrimmage who is unblocked. So that is an under the radar thing to look for. And you know what, guys? I don't know how Ohio State's going to find a way to generate explosive rushing offense with Travion Henderson if they can't or are limited in running split zone. And I guess we're just going to have to see if little old Ohio State can figure out a way to be explosive in the run game if they're not able to run split zone to the same level or efficiency as they have in previous years.
NCAA's out to get the Bucks.
If it becomes a banned offense, I think our name is like way cooler. Just throwing that out there.
Let's make it happen. That's Ohio State. Sparrow or Culver's, yes or no? Nebraska does enough for one Scott Frost to remain in his chair.
Tasty Ohio airport pizza.
I'm actually starting to come around here.
Okay, see? So I wrote a column for Athlon this week because I was kicking off my kind of coach roundup. Of course, Scott Frost, they playing in week 0. They soiled themselves and fell back in it, as the Southerners are wont to say, against Illinois last year. Of course, he has that opportunity to do that again this weekend. But guys, this became, and I think, Richard, you and I have already talked about this offline, the program that people kind of actually'd in the coach gossip circles this summer, where it's like, well, hang on, like, you know, he's got a terrible record in conference play. He's not done what he was supposed to. But, and I don't know, I talked about this in the column. Maybe it was people really feeding into the margin of loss, you know, at all the close losses they had. Oh, granted, they were playing from like way behind a lot. There are 5 winnable games based on the talent they have before we even get into the Mark Whipple, Casey Thompson, like allegedly renovated wide receiver core, all that stuff. Okay. There are 5 identifiable wins, and I won't read the entire schedule here, but then you have basically winning 1, maybe 2 of the swing games. So that's Minnesota, Illinois, Purdue. If they go to a bowl, he's fine. I'm just telling you.
Agreed.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Win 6.
So he's fine, is what I'm saying.
Unless they, some of those easily identifiables do not identify themselves. And
No,
that would be a disaster.
If the phrase Northwestern offense looks competent is uttered this weekend, there will be a new head coach in Lincoln come January.
That's not even a Godfrey like whip opinion. Like I
No.
reported that in Sports Illustrated. I'm reporting it right here. If he wins 6, he's probably okay. If he wins 7, all right, see you next year.
We'll talk a little bit about,
my opinion.
We're going to tease to this, Richard, because we're going to talk a little bit about our coach gossip stuff this week on splitzoneduo.com on our Patreon. But this fan base hasn't been to a bowl since 2016. Just give them a bowl.
I think that, remember, I do think we have to remember how they lost a couple of those games last year. It's instructive. It's not like oh boy, the ball bounced the wrong way and the ref fucked us. It's you ran a return formation to the wrong side of the field. Well, remember, some of those things were and could still be coaching.
Well, they didn't have a special teams coordinator.
I think they did. They did not have a good one.
They had some special teams faux pas.
They started
from
the
week
Frost
0.
era. Yeah, they started the Frost era and didn't have one.
Do you remember in the week 0 game that they played last year? They opened the year last year too against Illinois, and they had
a weird safety.
Yeah,
thing?
It was a punt returner who tried to field a punt at like his own half-yard line. Someone correct me if when they looked admirable in the box scores against really good teams in the midst of a losing season, Oklahoma or Ohio State.
Any of the high end Big East, the Eastern Division, yes,
almost everybody they lost to, they lost pretty respectable.
In those games,
every loss that they had last year,
but in those games against the good teams, I'm not talking about like the squeakers against bad. I'm saying when they perform admirably against a Michigan or an Oklahoma, they're still the team that just didn't actually start playing the game until like 5 minutes into the second quarter, which was
best
the problem.
4-8 team in the country. 4-8, 3-9. What were they last year?
They beat Northwestern. That was the only win they had in conference play.
Good Christ.
On the field, as far as things to watch for this team, the quarterback is Casey Thompson. I don't think he's that good, but I also don't think he's any worse than Adrian Martinez.
Though. He's got your boy.
Mark Whipple.
Your boy.
From Pitt. Yep. Mark Whipple
turn
from
Kenny
Pitt.
Pickett into a Heisman contender.
I think Mark Whipple did a really good job at Pitt and probably would still be at Pitt if him and Pat Narduzzi were a better personality match, which they clearly were not. And I think Pat started to indicate that in public a couple of weeks ago. I think he'll do a good job there. I'm more interested in the defense. O'Shawn Mathis is the edge rusher who they got from TCU as Gary Patterson was heading out of town. I think that we are going to sense pretty quickly that Nebraska's front seven might be pretty good. And actually, this is the one area where Northwestern might be okay. Is like that Northwestern, for whatever reason, has tended to have good offensive tackles. And they
have actually like OT1 in April.
Is that Skoronsky? Peter
Yes.
Skoronsky? Yeah. And they had Rashawn Slater a couple years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Skoronsky may very well be the first tackle taken off the board in April.
Maybe this week it might not totally show up in terms of Ryan Helinski for Northwestern getting buried by Nebraska's front. But I think Nebraska's front's going to be pretty tough. And that is the main reason for on-field belief in Nebraska this year. I'm not buying, like, no one accused me, if you like are listening to this, of like buying the hype or whatever. I don't think they're going to like finish in the top 25, but I think they're going to be pretty decent. And I think Scott is probably going to keep his job.
7 wins.
Something like that seems about right to me. Sbarro or Culver's, yes or no? I put this one in here for my own pleasure.
This is, I'm not happy about this.
The best passing game in the Big Ten, the other side of Ohio State, is going to belong to, oh no, don't let them do it, the Maryland Terrapins.
Godfrey, what if he's right?
Oh, God. Okay.
Because I think he's right.
All right, I'm going to let Richard do the
Interface with that we might have the second best quarterback and the second best receiver room in the Big Ten. Interface with that.
In the history of this podcast, in the history of this podcast, Alex saying interface with that is as close to like a Kirshner kind of fuck you dunk as you're ever going to get on this program. Interface with that, buddy.
No, I think he's right, man.
I think he might be right too. And I'm going to let you handle the smart football aspect of this. I would just simply posit just so we can include them in the conversation. Although I don't feel confident about the argument. Like, what about Purdue? All right. I like O'Connell as a returning quarterback. I like Braum. Purdue on large in mass, whatever, the last 2-3 seasons has been hit with a pretty stupid amount of bad injury luck. So if they are healthy, I think you're going to see more towards the team that upsets Ohio State at home and less towards the malaise that they've been in. Okay. They have a soft schedule
last year.
Yeah, I know. They beat Tennessee in the Music City Bowl. I just want to point that out. That's for no reason whatsoever. The schedule is soft after Penn State. They do turn over a decent amount on the O-line, so that's a little concerning. But they have a really, really good tight end named Payne Durham, who is not a NASCAR driver, but definitely looks like a NASCAR driver, who is shaping up to be one of those like tight ends that usually comes out of like Iowa, sometimes Wisconsin, that everybody talks about as just sort of like that can do it all tight end. I like them on paper a lot, and I told you guys in the depth of the offseason, I was like, I'm kind of reading about the ass end of the Big Ten and like the teams that don't get a lot of attention. Everyone's like, why? There has to be something that conjures up out of one of these programs. So I'm just going to pick Purdue. I like them. I like O'Connell.
Maryland is the boom team out of the not Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan, others. Right. Maryland is the boom team. I mean, I think it's going to be funny watching Maryland's offense and the Dolphins' offense and sort of like see what they both do to try to maximize one Tagovailoa or the other.
Yeah.
I think with Maryland, you're getting similar to what I think the Dolphins are going to get out of Tua. You're getting from Talia hella screens, hella RPOs. He's good over the middle of the field. He's legitimately, Talia is legitimately, in my opinion, good middle, intermediate parts of the field. Not so awesome outside the numbers or the hashes.
No.
But in a weird way for a college quarterback, gets the job done quite effectively, in my opinion, over the middle of the field and in the flats, the shallows, all that kind of stuff. Balls out quick, balls where it needs to be, placement, accuracy, yada, yada, yada. The stuff on time, the stuff that you have to be when you're throwing in condensed windows in the middle of the field, especially in the red zone. Get the ball to Raheem Jarrett and figure it out.
Not just him.
Figure the rest out.
A couple guys. Dante Demas is back from injury.
Dante Demas.
A couple more. Jacob Copeland. Thank you, Richard. Coming to us from Gainesville.
I forgot about that.
And Jashawn Jones, who has been with these teams since like the Maryland was beating Texas era a long time ago. So yeah, I think Jashawn Jones is on his third Maryland head coach, from Durkin to Matt Canada to Loxley. So like, I don't know who's going to run the ball for them, but the offensive line should actually be pretty good. Got a good left tackle. I am almost taking the pill this year with Maryland. And I will be hurt. I will certainly be hurt. But
so you're taking the baton from me of always critical of their alma mater, even though they have an obviously entertaining and effective offense.
Yeah, well, the problem is that I don't think we're going to be able to stop anybody, like anybody. But
I don't think he's all the way wrong there.
Yeah.
So Ole Miss.
So Maryland could be Big Ten Ole Miss this year. I think that is totally possible. I'm going to ditch the game format for the next one because there are no rules, and sometimes the game format does not capture what I want to talk about. Who is more likely to do something out of their ordinary identity, out of their ordinary cadence in 2022? And you have to pick one and have a good attitude about it, Stephen. Wisconsin or Iowa in the Big Ten West?
Is this just when you make these questions for me and Richard, is it just to be like, to force blood from us? Neither one of them is going to look any different than they always do.
Well, I think by ordinary cadence, he means, so Iowa had the surprise Big Ten championship year
Yes.
where they pretended they were good for like 8.5 weeks
Yes.
last year. This year,
Yes.
this is
ton
a
of returning
Wisconsin year, right?
starters. Yes. So Iowa will have a ton of returning starters and have the majority of that attention. You're right, Richard, because this shit is cyclical. It's like a perfect religious calendar. And then Wisconsin will end up being the surprise team that'll be more talented down the stretch. And then, Richard, I think you and I both agree it's probably because of Braylon Allen.
Oh yeah.
But here's the thing, because you have what looks to be a really, really good running back at Wisconsin, they're going to be Wisconsin. And then Iowa's going to be Iowa. I think if you're looking, Alex, your question was which one of them is not going to look like themselves. Iowa's going to do everything they can to lock into their identity because they have so much just the incumbent talent coming back. So maybe Wisconsin, but maybe they have, because they have a little bit more uncertainty on defense just in terms of personnel. So maybe they have to push the passing game a little bit more, but not really. That's all I got.
This stacks up to be an 8-4 Iowa year and a Big Ten championship game Wisconsin year.
Absolutely.
If we're back into
Congrats
if we're back
to the
into the cadence and the flow, congrats to Wisconsin on your second loss to Ohio State the first weekend of December.
So this is my thing about Wisconsin this year. And I'm asking this in a serious, non-rhetorical way. Why is Graham Mertz still the quarterback?
I think there are a lot of people who think year 3 in that offense, which I think is very similar to what I said about Graham Mertz going into year 2 in that offense this time last summer. I think people think very highly of Graham Mertz going into year 3.
Even year 4,
in this
he was a
offense.
redshirter. Yeah.
Yeah,
when it in air quotes really clicks.
Right.
I feel like he's isn't he in the territory of old white guy college quarterback?
Yes.
I'm gonna catch that motherfucker coming out of a daycare that I go to.
But this is my thing. Paul Chryst ain't dumb. He ain't dumb at all. Mertz has been terrible. And everything seemed to be on the wall for them to bring someone in to play quarterback as a transfer this year. Right. And they didn't. Right. And I don't know, maybe it's just that I'm still riding the high of the Kenny Pickett thing that happened last year.
Dude,
out of nowhere.
If you get anything from him, from him,
what do you need from him? A slant on
something.
3rd and 4?
No, something. And the thing is,
need more than
he was the most touted recruit in the history of that program, and he's given them basically nothing. And if that changes,
but I'm saying
Godfrey,
if Wisconsin does all the things they're supposed to, isn't that what a Wisconsin quarterback does?
No, because the thing here is this guy. Okay, let's talk about 2011-ish Alabama. When we all said they're playing this style of ball, we know why. They're better at it than everybody else.
Yes.
But if they had better than A.J. McCarron, they could do some really sick shit on offense, yada, yada, yada. It's the same thing.
Okay.
It's the same thing.
So, but by that token, Alabama was running that because they were trying to reduce uncertainty and just limit any, they were basically trying to just squeeze margins down to stamp out inefficiency and win.
I think Wisconsin is different in the
Scotty
fact
do that though?
I think Wisconsin is different in the fact that Paul Chryst, I think Paul Chryst would love to take the bridle off of Graham Mertz. I think Paul Chryst would love to run every pass play under the daggum sun.
Okay.
But they just can't. He's just has not, to this point, been good enough.
Congrats.
If he played to his if he played up to his ceiling, boy, this is really gonna. If he played up to his ceiling, they're in the Big Ten championship game with a fighting chance
You know that we're talking
against Ohio State.
You know that we're talking about the West because we started the segment by just almost in like a function of irony, anointing Wisconsin as the division winner and then shitting all over their offense. There's no other division in which you do that.
I think that Graham Mertz can. I think Graham Mertz should will take a step forward.
Ooh, lock it up.
It's not up to his potential. I don't think he's going to play up to his potential because I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
But
all right,
can he be better than last year?
I agree that this is a Wisconsin up year more than it's an Iowa up year.
It's a Capital One bowl year.
Iowa is so Iowa this year that it is painful.
They'll go 8-4.
And you
we'll
mean
laugh
it wasn't
about
last year?
But the thing is, last year, at least for a while, looked like an Iowa up year. And both of these schools have these years. The thing is, they saw the way that things unraveled in the back half of last year. And to my eye, they did not change anything. You know, Brian Ferentz is still the offensive coordinator. The two quarterbacks are the same quarterbacks. They're going to have some amazing players on defense, good linebackers, great defensive backs. And this has been the story for years. You know, I'm thinking back to like Desmond King and Josie Jewell at corner and linebacker. And now it's Riley Moss and who is their excellent linebacker, whose name is eluding me at the moment.
But this fits what we were saying, Alex, is that Iowa justifies its existence and its identity when there are very low expectations because they coach it up and come out of nowhere. They crest by riding that into the following season in which expectations follow, and then they Iowa the shit out of it and they win 8 games.
Yeah, also, neither of these teams to any significant extent, but I think especially not Iowa, are really playing in the transfer waters at all. So Iowa's just running it back. At some point, maybe Kirk will fire his offensive coordinator. Maybe he'll fire his offensive coordinator. Wait, it's his son. Probably won't. Sbarro Culver's, back to yes or no's. The last place teams in these two divisions are going to be repeaters, Indiana and Northwestern.
I did, again, a sort of, as is the case with any visit to Sbarro, a begrudging Sbarro, because I think Rutgers has a little bit of progress this year. Northwestern seems hellbound to not have any offensive consistency or identity. I like Helinski, but I don't know, man.
Indiana didn't win a conference game last year. Yeah, it was
bad. Also, Northwestern has the, if you're just going by last year's conference records, they have the toughest schedule this year.
Yeah.
That is bleak, Bubba.
So Rutgers, the thing for Rutgers is that they're running it back at quarterback with Noah Vidral. And that did not work at all last year for them. And they're just doing it again. Indiana is at least like trying something. They got Connor Bazelak from Missouri.
that sure is something.
It's something.
That is trying something.
And here's
correct.
the thing. Like, I think that if you take out what he did to the Bo Pelini LSU defense, that was a dysfunctional unit a couple of years ago, it's hard to find like high highs over Bazelak's time at Mizzou. But they did win some games. So maybe there's some reason for optimism there. Here's my thing about Indiana and why I think that they are going to probably be worse than Rutgers. That's not even why I think, but it's just kind of a big picture thought about them. How did this become a portal to save your job situation or something close to that so quickly?
I don't
know if they can fire him. I don't know if they can fire him, but it's just
because it's a hard job.
I also don't think it is, to be fair.
Job? If they don't win it, if they win one conference game a year, they're not going to be like, Tom, please retire. I don't know.
Shop at home.
While Kane Womack is building whatever he's building at South Al, and we've got all these.
I've created this. I've incepted it. I got Alex. I'm gonna get the rest of y'all.
I don't know. It's just
Kane Womack, Indiana head coach.
They are basically trying to import. They're trying to do like a Big Ten Western Kentucky from last year's situation. Like it's not just Bazelak. It's Sean Shivers, the short, fast running back from Auburn, is there now. DJ Matthews from FSU is supposed to be one of their good receivers this year. The coordinator is Walt Bell, who
former UMass coach,
a really handsome guy who's been responsible for a lot of bad offenses for a long time now. Like you have to go back to 2014-15 Arkansas State to find him leading good offenses consistently. It just feels like a lot of disparate parts need to come together for Indiana to find some life. And that makes me sad because things look to be... Oh my God,
is he offensive Bob Diaco?
He might be.
Is Walt Bell offensive Bob Diaco?
He might be.
What a
Batiako,
sentence.
incredibly charming. Like he's so handsome it hurts if you're around him. I'm just telling you. I don't know if Walt Bell is that handsome personally.
Richard, are you also? I think Illinois has been a project that you've been kind of interested in for a year or two. Do you think that Illinois continues to be notably better than Northwestern of the two Illinois?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm just curious about Illinois. I'm just curious. Quarterback, tough. Tough what they got at quarterback. I think, by the way, who they have at quarterback, one Tommy DeVito of Syracuse
Okay.
is, I believe, the penciled in starter. Remember when he got to Syracuse and it was like the biggest deal in the world, 4-star quarterback, yada, yada, yada. I'm interested in Illinois.
Okay.
I'm interested. Good coordinators, better defense than you expected last year. Salty. We all saw that. Arguably too salty, given the 9 overtime game against Penn State. Could have taken some less salt that afternoon. I'm curious about Illinois. I am.
I'm curious about Illinois because of Barry Lenny Jr. It's funny because I think I may have said this once on the show and just laughed about it, but then when I actually did my research, Brett Bielema did not hire Barry Lenny because UTSA ran all over that ass last year. But
What is Barry Lenny's job title, Stephen? For the
he's the
listeners?
offensive coordinator. He was the OC at UTSA last year. They beat Illinois. It's because they worked together. Barry Lenny's basically from Arkansas. He was the interim. If you remember, he was the interim head coach when the Hogs fired Chad. But I like that hire. Man, I am really trying to abandon every meme and thing I already know about a Brett Bielema of years past, several different years past, and take what I'm hearing at face value that he is somehow a different and more mature head coach. Let's see if that one bites me.
Okay, let's see about it.
I'm thinking about going to Illinois, Indiana. Is a thing I said out loud.
Ditching game format again. Two Big Ten West programs that have kind of a somewhat similar arcs the last few years. Who ends this year feeling more chipper about their coach's long-term future at the school and the direction of things? Is it Jeff Brom? Is it Purdue with Jeff Brom, knowing that, Mama could call, Louisville could call again if Scott Satterfield does not have a good year. We don't know. It's a possibility. Or Minnesota with PJ Fleck, which is still going pretty well, but playing with a year 6 quarterback who might be kind of a high watermark possibly, and also with a lot of off-field stuff.
I went Brom here. I guess I'm more bullish on Purdue than anyone on the show, but you guys both are very confident in Fleck, so I want to hear it.
Oh, I don't know. Richard, you might be more confident than me.
Yeah, I am. I think we're good in the hood with Fleck. I think it is what it is there. I think they get Ibrahim back, a running back. I know
Good
they're going
player.
to rejigger that. I know they're going to rejigger that offensive line a little bit, but they are what they are. They are always saltier than you think.
Yeah.
They're always a tougher out than you think. He's always got a receiver or 3. Skill position's good. Tanner Morgan's back for the 95th year. They're going to run the ball well.
Okay.
They're going to RPO well, and they're going to be
Soroka's back.
fine.
Soroka's back.
Soroka's back. They're going to be fine.
That's the coordinator he did like a 1-year externship at Penn State.
Well, yeah, and basically it's seemingly hired to fall on the sword for Franklin at that one point where things got really shitty at Penn State.
Yeah.
I do think the offensive line, I'm doing some projecting offensive line. Like, it's a lot of new offensive linemen. It could very well not gel. That's fair, but I'll take it.
I just don't
I'll
like them.
take my chances
I
there.
don't like them relative to the big dumb but big good, twins that we talk about all the time, Wisconsin, Iowa. I'm talking myself into Nebraska over them. So I'm thinking less about, like, none of what Richard said I disagree with. I'm just thinking at the end of the year, where is the stock on Fleck if they're not winning swing games in the West?
Yeah. I think the answer is Fleck. I do think that Minnesota is pretty good in the neighborhood, but I can't shake the feeling that the first year that's other than 2020, which was a weird one, where they don't hit expectations. I just feel like when the end comes for PJ Fleck at Minnesota, I think it's going to be explosive. I think it's going to be like one of those everyone flees the sinking ship and says not nice things on the way out.
I would. I'm not confirming. I would agree with that feeling.
And I don't know that I just think he's a firework, right? That's what they say. He's going to fly and he's going to burn and then he's going to burn out and fall to the ground. And I don't think that that's going to happen there this year. I just think that personality and there's a lot of people who seem very cool publicly talking about how much they hate this guy who have been with him. And part of that's because if he's your guy, he's your guy. And if he's not, you're not. I think they're good enough this year to stave that off, but I just can't shake that feeling about Minnesota at some point. I don't think it's going to come this year. Ditching game format once again. 3 Big Ten East schools gave hostage-taking extensions to their head coaches after 2021. Michigan to Harbaugh, Penn State to Franklin, Michigan State to Tucker. Richard and I did a whole Patreon show about how to understand these as
Splitsonduo.com.
Splitsonduo.com as one-sided extensions that are only extensions in as much as they make it harder for the school to get out of them. They do not make it hard for the coach to get out. So I would like to ask, do we think that any of these 3 are positioned to regret all of the leverage that they just gave their head coach at some point in the next 4 months?
You have to read oh wait.
Yeah, well, you have to read the notes here. This is bullshit.
This is some total bullshit here, Alex. Keep going.
Absolute bullshit.
I remember how fast things changed with Michigan and Harbaugh from
No,
2020.
No.
Keep going.
You assigned
Get
us
into it.
schools.
Oh, I did assign you schools because I
That's
wanted
what
to
I'm
make sure that
talking
we would
about.
talk about all of these. That's all
horseshit.
I did.
Yeah. Why can't I have Michigan?
Godfrey, tell me if you think Penn State feels any regret at any point in the next 4 months about the Franklin thing. I didn't tell you how to answer. I just told you to talk about it.
Why can't I get Michigan?
Take Michigan if you want it.
I don't know if it's regret in the time frame that you're proposing, but I know that Penn State's not going to look like Ohio State, maybe even Ohio State's floor this year in the next 2 years. So is that regretful? Not necessarily. Are we still seeing a Penn State that seems to be stuck on achieving that last kind of part of the journey? Yes. Take that for what you will. We have not talked about Penn State yet in this Big Ten preview. They are probably the most interesting team to me because we're kind of quietly running out of chances to do things like fix the offensive line and establish a post Moorhead, McSorley, Barkley offensive identity. And we're still throwing them in every time we say stuff like, well, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State.
Exactly.
Right?
And at one point in time, they kind of have to come out of that sentence.
That don't sound right. Like in the last 2 years, like there very quickly, we saw the most workmanlike fucking 3-star team in college football become portal champions and look more talented than Miami last year and all that shit. So I got to see something, guys. Like, this is Alex, your framework is fun, but I don't know if it's going to happen in 4 months, but it's coming.
Yeah, Penn State still has some Penn State qualities this year. Like, Clifford is still the quarterback. I think they're going to have, as they tend to, they're going to have one really good receiver. That being Parker Washington. Jahan Dotson's gone.
Honestly.
Maybe 2. They're going to have at least one really good DB, Joey Porter Jr.
The Tinsley kid is not bad.
Yeah, so I think they're still going to look and feel like Penn State. I think that the best thing that could happen to Penn State this year that would actually inspire optimism that Penn State could once again beat Ohio State on an up year is if Clifford loses this job to the freshman at some point during the season.
I don't think that's going to happen, big guy.
I don't think it's going to either. I don't think you're going to do that to your 6-year quarterback.
We're going to be having a lot more conversations about Penn State if he's losing his job to the freshman.
My point is there's an upside play at quarterback there, and there's a Sean Clifford play. And you know exactly what Sean Clifford is. We talk about Mertz might make the big step at Wisconsin. I don't think so with Clifford. You know what he is, which is fine.
I do think Godfrey's point is very well taken. They are on the precipice of needing to be mentioned in a different breath than Ohio State and Michigan. They're on the wrong side of that bubble right now, have been the last 2 years.
Well, they were in 2020, they were in Michigan's same bubble, but I see what you mean, particularly over the last year. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, it could be a step back. Could be a step back this year, which allows for somebody else in the East, if you can get them. God, the thing is here, though, if Penn State does take a step back, it does throw a fly into the ointment of they are the fulcrum for Brian Harsin theory, given that they go to Auburn week 3.
Man.
Yeah, true, Stephen. Which way you want to have it? Which way you want to have it?
Yeah, wait, can't have your cake and eat it too here, Hoss.
You want him firing Brian Harsin, or you want some regret in Penn State? You can't have both.
I'm not cheering for these things. This is how shit gets started on Twitter. I'm not cheering for either thing, says man in Boise State home field t-shirt. Okay, hang on, Richard. We're talking about falling off a precipice in which Michigan and Ohio State are your contemporaries. If that's the case, even if you're on the edge of the table, you're still better than this Auburn team is right now.
Okay, there it is.
All right.
He brings it around.
Yeah, just checking, guys. All right.
He brings it around.
I did not make those two things sound equal. And if I did, I did not mean to.
I'm not taking because this is my choice. I'm taking because it is mandated by the executive producer Split Zone Duo that I take Michigan State and not Michigan for my answer to this question.
I just want you to explain why you feel how you feel.
Look, the end of the day, they could still be ass in coverage. They've added some transfers back there, and I think Mel Tucker has taken to actually coaching the corners.
See also State Ohio game.
Yeah, I think, like, look, we're all adults here. What happened last year was a happy accident in the sense of the New Year's Six bowl game.
They were ahead of schedule last year.
Ahead of schedule.
Can level,
ahead of schedule.
We can level with each other. All right.
Shout out to LSU for making him very rich.
They don't have another Kenneth Walker. They could have
the biggest thing. Yeah.
They could have a very good running back in transfer that they brought in, and still not Kenneth Walker. I do think and know that Michigan State is trying to not portal. They only took, I know they took less than 10 this year from the portal.
They took one from Georgia, cornerback. Amir Speed.
That's the corner.
Well, yeah,
yes, Amir Speed is the corner.
Yeah, Mel used to work there, and they tend to have good football players.
They are still going to be. They're still going to be great up front. They still got maybe the best defensive lineman up front, Jacob Slade. So we know that they're still going to be, I think, good enough up front. I'm still worried about the back end. I'm not taking at face value the changes there. Got to see it because they just were not great back there last year. And remember how they generated explosive plays. And by they, I mean Kenneth Walker in the run game last year.
Yeah.
Go back and watch the Michigan game, man. He's tackled in air quotes. He's on the ground. I don't know what his yards before contact were. And I don't know what his highlight yards were last year, but they've got to be
5 yards. Yeah.
After 5 yards, but they have got to be both very impressive for Kenneth Walker, because when you watch how they generated explosive run game last year, it was Kenneth Walker doing Kenneth Walker things, and that was it.
I completely agree. We are going to see a regression, and unfortunately, I guess, because Mel's richer than 4 foot up a bull's ass now, so hats off to him. But unfortunately for Mel and the staff, they're going to have a regression, even though they're headed in the right direction. I just kind of want to cheer for this team because of the amount of salty ass going around about Michigan State and the portal from other coaches in this league, as if they cheated. They inherited a roster and a program whose ethos was like workman-like, blue collar, we'll coach a 2 into a 3. And Mel had the audacity to go, hey, yeah, you're probably not going to win any important college football games that way. So they flushed a roster and restocked it all completely within the rules. And God, I still hear people complaining about that. Also, Richard's right. He's not a portal. He's not the portal guy. That was never the plan.
Said we're going high school.
Yeah, that was never the plan. But Richard, your note here is interesting. What if he cannot win the big boy battles in high school recruiting? That would be foreboding.
What if they're just not that great evaluating talent, high school talent?
If that's the case, yeah, and if that's the case, you can't spin the portal for 15 to 18 a year and be successful. It cannot happen.
Like it has the ability to not work out.
Yes.
And that could be what sinks the ship there.
Yeah. I'm just getting.
Don't know that it, not predicting that it will, don't know that it will. Saying that it can, there's your buyer's remorse.
I'm just bullheaded because of the amount of just, it's weird. It's for completely different reasons. This was how people talked about Fleck for the first 2 years for completely different reasons. Like, people are mad at Tucker for football reasons, but still, like, just he found a strategy and outflanked you, at least for a year and a half. Get over it.
I'll take Michigan, but I'm going to submit this for open
wow.
feedback.
Oh, Alex took Michigan. Alex took Michigan.
Not you'll take Michigan.
So I think the proper way to judge them is on the non-Ohio State games this year. I think 2 in a row against Ohio State is going to be.
Boy, they love hearing that.
They do. I think it's going to be a little bit too much to ask to get 2 in a row there, particularly because the game is in Columbus, and we've talked about what we think Ohio State's going to be. As far as on-field optimism inspired, you'd like it if JJ McCarthy turned out to be a dude and like played more and well. Cade McNamara is solid. I mean, he's better than the weight class of quarterback that Harbaugh had at Michigan for the first 6 or 7 years. He's better than like your Rudox and your Spates and you're
fading Shea Patterson right now.
Right. And your Shea Patterson, certainly. But McCarthy, I think, probably has a higher degree of upside. And you'd like to know going into 2023 that you have that guy so that you could attempt to be back in the playoff that year. Here's the thing, though. I think that if Michigan somehow goes worse than 9-3, which I don't think they will, because I think their non-conference schedule, by the way, is nothing. It is Hawaii, UConn, and Colorado State. But let's say they're 9-3, which is about what you'd expect. I don't think that the tension between Harbaugh and the school that had existed before last year is gone forever for 2 reasons. One,
because he is who he is.
Actually, let's just sum it up like that. Because
you're saying it isn't gone forever.
No, it's not gone forever.
Okay,
no, it's not gone forever.
Oh,
and I don't think it's. I don't think it's between him and Ward Manuel necessarily, the AD. But everyone knows, and I know this. We've reported on this, and I had some conversations about this when he was looking into the Vikings last year. People, very, very high level people at Michigan, I know, thought for sure he was out the door, and they were very annoyed by it that he would leave in those
circumstances. Over till it's over.
He says, I'm not. He says, I'm never looking again at the NFL. Your contract says absolutely yes, you are. I believe the contract, not him. And here's the other thing: all politics is local. Jim Harbaugh works at the University of Michigan. I don't think that he's going to get. In fact, I know he's not. He's not going to get fired for this. I'm not saying that this is going to lead to his downfall at Michigan, but the president of the University of Michigan, the regents of the University of Michigan, think that it is less cool than some other power structures might think it when Harbaugh goes out and talks about how if any player on my team gets someone pregnant, we will take that baby. Absolutely, abortion is the cruelest thing in the world.
Is a direct quote.
It's a direct quote, and also it's bullshit. There are plenty of foster kids in the state of Michigan. I don't think Jim Harbaugh has taken any of them in. It's complete bullshit. It's a bodily control thing. Whatever. He is not, and he's a complicated guy politically. He's got a lot of views, some left, some right. I'm not saying he's getting fired for that. I'm just saying.
In conclusion, America is a land of contrast.
I'm just saying, Jim Harbaugh has already warned some people out at that place. And and if he sticks on this whole, like, going after women's bodily autonomy at Michigan is going to annoy some people in a way, and like being very public about it is going to annoy some people in a way that if he were the head coach at Arkansas would not be a problem for him. I don't think. I'm just saying that there's a fraught relationship because of him always opening his mouth about various different things. Also, he does stuff that I think annoys Michigan. Like he still deifies Bo Schembechler in a way that Ward Manuel does too, but that a lot of people at Michigan, especially as they have all of these investigations ongoing, including one recently into their men's hockey program, just are like, Jim, please shut up. Please shut up.
Your problem with the Bo thing is that other part of the sentence. Bo is Ward Manuel does
it too. He does it too. But I just think that he wears people out. It all comes into a big picture. And I think that at some point in the next year or two, is Michigan going to be pretty pissed off that at least for a moment, that they gave this guy complete dominion over their football program for as long as he wants it. Yeah, I think that there might be some regret there at some point.
Yeah, I think the regret is more tinged to the fact that I don't know how the hell they're going to rush the passer without those 2 defensive ends. Like, I think they are in.
We all know if you're winning, it doesn't matter. But what if the next 2 years do not get back to the highs of last year?
Yeah. You're sprinkling some L's in there that you don't want to take. I think this is another bring it in. Let's all be adults here. They got the opportunity last year. The funny thing is, they are Georgia to a lesser degree last year, right? Georgia had the vulnerable Alabama, and they were able to get over the hump and do it in the end. Michigan had the vulnerable Ohio State. They were able to get over the hump in the end. So to a lesser degree, I think there are Michigan and Georgia parallels there. Obviously, they did it with defense, didn't exactly score a million points. That wasn't exactly their MO, yada, yada, yada. I think this year, Michigan, we know that what Michigan lost at edge rusher. We know that ain't coming back. When you watch how they played on defense, the assignment was you two gentlemen get after the passer and we'll figure out the rest. I do think Michigan is okay at secondary. Like, I don't think their front was masking a bad secondary, but I do think that I am very interested in how and in what ways they change on defense this year to compensate for or get around the fact that they do not have Ojabo and Hutchinson on the edge, that they can simply pin the ears back and say, gentlemen, get after it and we'll figure out the rest.
I'm just Googling NFL hot seat 2022, and that will inform my entire viewpoint on Jim Harbaugh after Ohio State beats them by 28.
Set Scott Frost aside of the
Panthers?
13, and I think we think he's staying, but just put him aside. Aside from him, you think all 13 Big Ten coaches are back again next year?
No,
Because there's always some shit. I think the better question should probably be non-fired.
Okay.
Oh,
I don't.
That's harder.
That's what I mean. I like somebody's going to fucking retire. Somebody's going to go to the NFL. It always fucking happens. Not fired is the better version of the question.
Yeah, I'm culversing this for reasons that we will get into on the Coach Gossip Show later this week on SplitZoneDuo.com.
That's a very long Big Ten preview from us. Thanks for listening. We're going to do the MAC.
SEC podcast.
We're going to do the MAC in a moment. But first, some podcast business. If you use the promo code SCD20 at homefieldapparel.com, you will get 20% off your first order. That's God for getting a phone call from someone figuring out, how can I order Split Zone Duo t-shirts? And if you just Google Home Field Split Zone Duo tees, you can find those on Home Field's website. We are very excited, by the way, in the coming weeks to have a way for returning Home Field customers to get some money off of some Home Field products, because we know many, in fact, our survey tells us most of you have already ordered from Home Field. But if you haven't yet, 20% off your first order with SCD20, and we'll have some more stuff in the very, very near future. Richard, congrats. At least you didn't get bumped to third place by Ohio State in the Big New Saturday standings.
I told you so.
I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that we're focusing on the wrong things with Home Field. I think what we should be focusing on is the fact that Home Field's not launching a shirt to commemorate what happened on week 18 last season of the NFL season. And I think it's instructive to remember the fact that our friends at Home Field are debuting the Indianapolis Colts collection this week.
Okay.
They have moved on
Y'all got
to become an NFL show. They've moved on to become an NFL shirt company, which I think is great for them. But at the end of the day, when we talk about a Colts collection, what we're forgetting is that the Indianapolis Colts marched in to Jacksonville, Florida on January 9th, 2022 with it all to play for. The Colts were saying, if we win this game against the worst team in the league, we get to go to the playoffs. And what did the boy wonder, Trevor Lawrence, do? But take the Jags
Fuck up
to
your draft
glory.
stock.
The only shred of glory that I have had beyond him being drafted since week 3, 2018, when the Jags housed the Patriots at home. Jaguars 26, Colts 11, season over for the Colts. And the Colts brain trust has not stopped talking about it since. This is important to note.
Okay.
This is important to note. The Colts have built their entire offensive foundation on the disappointment
I'm going to lay down.
at the end of last season. The Jags live rent-free in your head. Irsay, Chris Ballard, your favorite NFL reporter's favorite GM, can't build a program that can beat the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. Look it up. Figure out the last time they did it. Frank Wright, Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's the savior of the Colts. Matt Ryan's going to take them to prosperity, take them to the Super Bowl.
Why are we doing this?
I don't know.
Why are we alienating a sponsor? I don't understand this.
Here's why. Because Penn State beat their ass in Big New Saturday. The hot beer weirdos from Philadelphia beat their ass.
It's tough, Richard. It's tough.
That's obfuscation from the main point.
Homefieldapparel.com, SCD20, 20% off your first order. And we've got some more coming soon for the rest of you. Thanks
Go
a lot.
Jags, goddammit.
Go Colts, I guess. I don't know.
All right, it is time. This is a long Big Ten preview. It is time to talk about the other Midwestern Conference in FBS college football. It's the Mid-American, the MAC. Game format stays the same. We'll start with a Sbarro or Culversing involving Northern Illinois. So NIU's 2021 season left a lot of contradictory hints. On the one hand, minus 21 in scoring margin. And you would think that they are a big regression candidate on that basis after they won the conference following a winless 2020. They were 7-3 in one-score games. Only Louisiana at 7-0 was better in FBS. On the other hand, they are in the top 25 in Bill Connolly's returning production. They built a really straightforward identity in 1 year. 2 years, but they hired an NFL running backs coach in Thomas Hammock, and they started running the hell out of the ball very well.
There's some sick shit on offense, man.
All that is durable. It should be. So yes or no, Sbarro or Culvers, NIU keeps it going in 2022 and avoids, the big fall back to earth that we might normally expect with a team that made its living in close games.
Hopefully on offense, look, their offense is built to maximize fine margins. I think that's fair. It's fair to say. You would think that there is an upward trajectory that may also look like them sliding backwards from a win total.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah, I think this is very how you look at it. Remember, this is a team that didn't win a game in the weird 2020 season. They only had their second losing season in 12 years in 19. That phase is over. I'm very confident that what you would constitute as the rebuild is over. However, I don't know if they win the division or the MAC. So both things can be true.
One thing that I'm watching for is if this is like if Northern Illinois running back is now just a plug and play situation where you're going to get big yardage. So the running back who did a lot of the heavy lifting last year, Jay Ducker, is at Memphis now. They matriculated him, I guess, upward within the G5, in this portal world that we live in. They've got a new one now. Also, this is who, the person that I maybe trust the most on G5 analysis is Chris Fanini of The Athletic. Harrison Whaley is his breakout pick, and I think I agree with that on the basis that the offensive line is pretty much intact, and it just might be a good job to be the running back at Northern Illinois going forward. That's the name. Harrison Whaley could run for very, very many yards for the NIU Huskies this year. I think that upward trajectory, fewer wins is a good bet, like maybe 8 wins this year, but they're good. Last year, the anti-NIU in the MAC was Toledo. The Rockets are the best recruiting team in the MAC most years. They were 0-5 in one-score games, and they went 7-6, despite having by far the best scoring margins in the conference, both overall and in league play. And that's actually been a problem for the last several years under Jason Candle. Believe it or not, by the way, how many years would you think he's been the coach at Toledo since he replaced Matt Campbell?
I know the answer, so I won't say.
I do not know.
This is going to be 7 years.
Good night.
It doesn't feel like Matt Campbell left Toledo that long ago, but he did. Overall, since Candle has been in this job, Toledo is 30-16 in the conference, and that is tied for the best record in the league in that time. But they've only won the league once, and they are 7-8 in those one-score games. But in the last 7 of those, going back to mid-November of 19, they are 1-6 in these one-score games. My point is Toledo is the most talented team in the MAC. They have a lot going for them, but they don't close a deal, whether that's because they've had bad luck or they lack that dog in them. Last year, they lost by a combined 8 points.
Say it again. Again.
Nope. Last year, they lost by a combined 8 points to NIU, Central and Eastern Michigan. So big wind up here because I do not know what the fuck to make of this team. Toledo gets it together finally, or they don't.
I borrowed this just as a smart bet. I guess this is the reverse hot hand fallacy. The idea that if the hot hand fallacy in basketball is if you're shooting the lights out, you'll always shoot the lights out. this is like one of the fundamental tenets of like preseason advanced stat wonking is that like if you're on the negative side of these close games or the positive side, you will regress in the other direction. That being said, I can't see anything that would prove it will change. Like Alex, you had the long lead. I think you were trying to imply that there's some sort of psychological cultural issue that happens during these one-score games.
I don't know. I'm not trying to imply that. I'm trying to imply that they just haven't had the juice in these games for whatever reason. And I'm not trying to pick a side in the analytic crusades about close games. I'm not.
They don't have an easy schedule necessarily. They play Ohio State, and then they have a pretty tough October in conference play. So we'll know end of October, I think, in terms of quality. However, this is that team on paper. Where you're like, okay.
I personally am not terribly bullish on the team whose head coach almost left to be an offensive coordinator during the offseason. But that's
Miami,
just
was
me.
it?
Yes, but that's just me.
Forgot about that.
I do think it's time for something to be shown here. Godfrey, you mentioned that they have a tough schedule. They play one of the more interesting games of the year against San Diego State this season.
Yes, and that's just a great game. I'm very excited. I love a G5, 2 G5s in a non-conference, Alex.
And that'll be in the new stadium for SDSU.
Yeah, but shit, man, that's a tough draw.
Richard and I think SDSU is a regression candidate. We talked about that the other week while you weren't in.
No punt god.
It would be really good if Toledo won that game.
Yes, that would be huge for them. Yes.
Like, it's just like kind of time to see something here.
I want to say they have two other complete joke non-conference games. I think so. Honestly, none of this matters because we don't measure the MAC in non-conference ever. No one does.
No, you don't.
The only thing you do is if you're narrative building an undefeated team at like the waning days of the BCS, or like when Fleck did it recently with Western Michigan. So what we should focus on is where are you with those 4 or 5 top end teams that you're actually going to play in conference. And I don't have, that's where I kind of base my argument of like, I don't see this being any different than the previous X amount of years where it's like very talented, yet not necessarily fulfilling promises.
Yeah. If they don't at least win the West this year, I kind of think it's time to go shopping if you're Toledo.
It's going to be a hard fire to make, but I don't disagree with you.
It's like they have a new athletic director.
They have a new athletic director.
Yeah.
Young black dude who is about that life.
It's just like, even though it's like a bunch of near misses, and I think he's a perfectly good coach, it's like, if you're like 1 for 7 in conference titles at Toledo, it's the MAC is a hard win to establish hegemony in, but you better at least be in the conference title game. Like you can't be in a state where like Kent State is your equal if you're Toledo. Like that just doesn't. It's just not how it should be. We'll see. Sbarro recovers. Jim McElwain has settled into a peaceful existence at Central Michigan, clearly over the last few years. So, yes or no, he is about to Frank Solich this thing and be a solid G5 coach who just enjoys his life in Michigan.
I can do
for
this
15 years.
Pretty quickly. I know he's very happy at CMU, and this has nothing to do with the chips. But I'm going to Culver's this because I don't think Wazoo is going to be stable, and I think that would be a job that would pursue him if there's different leadership.
Richard, Jim McElwain expert that you are.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's wow. I mean, I agree that there are places that will pursue him. I think it's interesting that Godfrey's bugaboo job is always Washington State. I don't know why.
With Mac?
But your bugaboo job is Washington State.
With Mac?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yes.
Godfrey's trying to fire this guy at Washington State.
Not necessarily with Mac, but in general, your posture towards Jake Dickert and Washington State or whatever is very funnily dismissive.
I like
Everybody
the
gets
kid
one.
from Incarnate Word. I like him, but that dude, look at that division and tell me where, like, what?
Everybody gets one. Yours is Wazoo.
Okay.
Look, if Wazoo opens in the future, not saying it's going to open this year, in the future. Is that something that would enthuse him? Sure. I mean, I don't know. Colorado State, when mama calls.
In immediate terms for Central Michigan this year, a couple things. You know who their offensive coordinator is now?
I don't know if I want to know the way that's set up.
Paul
How bad?
Petrino.
Oh yeah.
He is
Holy
Central
cow.
Michigan's OC. Also, they return the leading rusher by a healthy bit from FBS last year, Lou Nichols. Their quarterback is back. It's funny because we were just talking about how NIU should be pretty good again and Toledo should win this division. But you could talk me into Central Michigan winning this conference for the first time since 2009. Like, I think I would find that like the first time since the Dan Lefevre, Antonio Brown days. You remember those? Those were actually pretty memorable teams. You could talk me into it, into CMU doing some high level business this year. Sun Bowl winners over Wazoo last year. Speaking of, by the way, Frank Solich, who was the subject of the last one, Sabaro or Culver's here. So everything that Solich built at Ohio over like a decade and a half, seemed to crumble pretty fast in 2021. He retired right before the season. Turned out that the team he left behind was not good. They went 3-9. They bring a ton back, but they are now pretty far behind even Kent State and also Miami. So yes or no, Ohio has a reasonable path back within a few years to the upper tier of the MAC.
Yeah, this is a Culver's. I mean, they got work to do.
This is where you realize how like quickly you can get lost in the sauce there.
Yeah,
in that league,
definitely. I'm not trying to shade this or be curt about it, but this is not working out. And this came up a lot when I was doing Coach Gossip in the season preview with MAC coaches. It already doesn't really look like what Solich had going when it was good, and so they're going to have to make some tough decisions soon.
No, you could be midway through a significant rejigger. I'm not trying to say
it's possible. Yes,
it's possible. You could be midway through that, but it's midway through it.
They have scheduled themselves some difficulty. They have both Penn State and Iowa State on the docket this year. Also, they have made their quarterback position a family business. Remember their last quarterback, Nathan Rourke, who was like really, really good for a long time. His little brother is now the quarterback there, Curtis Rourke. And, we hope that it works out. It has not been in a good place for the last year. We'll see if it changes. I want to break game format once again, as is our prerogative here. 2 of the last 3 winners of this conference are Miami and Ball State. I would posit that they are 2 of the most, maybe the 2 most anonymous programs in FBS, because neither of them is ever bad enough to get like internet made fun of. But they're also just pretty hard to break through, at least on kind of a national stage. These are 7th and 8th year head coaches. Chuck Martin still at Miami, Mike New still at Ball State. By the way, Ball State finished in the top 20 in the COVID year 2020, which is an incredible achievement, even if it was a COVID-aided thing. What I'm asking here, because they've both been pretty good pretty recently, is do you think that either of these 2 programs might be on the verge of busting out of that highly relative anonymity with the understanding, that in the grand scheme, what we really mean by that is just be a MAC program with an identity that people talk about in, the way they've talked about maybe Sean Lewis's Kent State the last few years or Hammock's NIU, where, you start to associate these teams with something other than, they're sometimes decent and kind of hanging out.
I'm Culver.
Yes.
I'm Culver's on this because I don't know if what you just described, Alex, is I think the idea of the MAC bust out team that everyone talks about for a couple of weeks, I think that's diminishing year by year. It's a bigger MAC issue than
I think that Ohio has a very quick path to, in air quotes here, national relevance. Because remember, Miami is one of the like nebulous, random, not Ohio State, Ohio schools that magically like every Big Ten head coach of some repute, like Miami is their alma mater. and you don't realize it until they have like some semblance of upswing. Notable alumni that went to Miami, if you don't know this, Paul Brown of the Browns, Ara Parsegan, Notre Dame, Woody Hayes, Bo Schembechler, Jim Tressel. Now you may say, well, Richard, those are guys who are old, done and dusted. The games move on. Anybody know where John Harbaugh and Sean McVay went to school?
Yeah, also former Speaker of the
Alrighty.
House, Paul Ryan, I believe, as
I
well.
thought Paul Brown was the Bengals.
And Roethlisberger.
Remember, the path to national relevance is John Harbaugh and Sean McVay on the Sunday pregame shows saying, I love my alma mater, repping my alma mater because they only lost 2 or 3 games this season and have had an upswing. That's the path to relevance. Rinse your reputation. Use the NFL.
I would
Ben Roethlisberger's out of the league now.
Ben Roethlisberger's out of it. It's been a long time. It's been since Roethlisberger, and I think he might be it for a long while, even before that, of like Matt QBs making it.
Yeah, notice I did not say players.
Yeah. However, I want to surface that the quarterback for Miami is Brett Gabbert, younger brother of one Blaine Gabbert.
Yep.
Who also,
Go
Blaine
Jags.
Gabbert like has had like a career renaissance, right? Like he's still in the league.
Oh, Jags.
Yeah. But with the Bucks, right? Isn't he Brady's backup, or he's been Brady's backup?
No, Kyle Trask is currently Brady's back.
Okay.
But
anyway.
yes, he was at a point in time Tom Brady's back.
Point is,
You're right.
so
You're right.
this is the young quarterback from Miami of Ohio. He is going to be a junior this year. He was third team All MAC last year. Pretty nice numbers last year. 26 touchdowns, 6 picks, almost 3,000 yards.
To correct the record, excuse me.
Yeah.
Blaine Gabbert is still on the Bucks and is still a backup quarterback. By the way, hold on, brief pause. We're an NFL podcast again. We have not talked enough about the fact that Tom Brady has not been at Bucks camp for the last 2 weeks.
He got back.
And everybody's just like, oh yeah, personal reasons. See you in a couple weeks, Tom. How is this not like the biggest story in the NFL? Anyway.
I think because you're Tom Brady, you just get to do what you want. And they have and you're able to make the media be compliant enough that the best investigation into this is happening on Reddit about whether or not he was filming The Masked Singer.
Well, I'm sure Tom's plastic surgeon did good work this time.
I am certain that you are correct. Also, I think Miami's path is interesting because in particular this year, the quarterback is interesting with Brett Gabbert. Ball State, harder. The fact that they had a top 20 season is
harder.
is
Great
really
pause
something.
there.
Yeah, it's tougher. And I think that Ball State is likelier to be kind of bad this year. Sort of seems to be the general computer consensus about them. Lost a ton
Godfrey,
on defense.
Are we pro Mike New? Are we jury still out on Mike New?
I'm gonna go jury still out, but leaning pro.
Okay.
All right.
Gotta show me something, baby.
So the most eye-catching coach move in this conference in, I don't know, a long time happened this offseason when Joe Moorhead left his Oregon offensive coordinator job to go to Akron and take over the Zips from the fired Tom Arth. Let's just, Sabara or Culver's, yes or no? Are we believers here? This thing going to work?
Well, I mean, they're going to be better because they were fucking terrible. But Joe's not an actual, he was educated by Jesuits. It doesn't make him a miracle worker, at least in year one. I mean, the biggest thing to take apart or to take away is that when the Bowden run, that's right, the Bowden run fell apart at Akron very miserably and there was an exodus, Tom Arth did not have a portal and Joe does. Tom Arth came from the FCS. Joe is coming from the heights of college football. These things are going to benefit Akron in a shorter term than what they've been used to. However, it is still an uphill. It is an uphill climb. Is Joe sitting at Akron waiting for Pitt to open? Who can say?
Might be waiting a while about that.
Make a bowl game, see a Pitt in a couple years.
You got
I
it.
think we all know where this is Could, I should say.
Maybe I can't
Be
believe
headed.
we're having a realignment on this show where I'm the one who's not firing Narduzzi.
I know
which is
you're all
funny.
up. You're all up on
Yeah.
Nard Dog. What the
I don't know.
fuck?
We'll see how the first month or two of this year goes. I think
Picking a top 25 team is funny as shit to me.
What I
Whatever.
don't understand why they shouldn't be. I really don't get it. And actually, it ties into Akron why they
Oh,
shouldn't
boy.
be. I think a lot of people think that because Pitt lost Jordan Addison, like that, and Kenny Pickett, of course, that this is like a massive regression candidate. I don't think they're going to win the ACC again, but Akron's most promising player from last year plays for Pitt now. Kanata Mumpfield, freshman All-American wide receiver. Kind of ironic that the portal that we think might help Akron actually for the short term has probably hurt them a
Yes,
little bit.
because a new coach came in.
Yeah, of course.
Right. And it
Um,
works both ways.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I think Akron, I think if Moore had stayed there for 4 years, you could talk me pretty easily into them at least playing in the title game in this conference because it is the most upwardly mobile conference that you have in FBS at least. One of those teams that has exemplified upward mobility. Sabar or Culver's, do you think that Godfrey Sean Lewis finally lands something Power 5 after the season? And why do I ask? Because I don't know.
SplitZoneDuo.com.
Okay.
Listen to the Patreon show this week.
All right, we'll talk in depth about Sean Lewis there. I will break the game format to ask you one more thing about this conference. And it sticks with the theme of social mobility that I just mentioned. You can go from basement to penthouse very quickly in this league, probably more quickly than any other.
Okay.
See Northern Illinois going from winless to league champ in 1 year. Pick a bad team from 2021 just to dark horse it. A futures pick to play in the conference title game this year
But
if you
we
have
aren't
to.
picking them, Alex. You gave them, and you fucking gave me Bowling Green. Are you high?
I wanted to do that to you. I did. Yeah.
Are you high? Is my
Godfrey,
answer.
you're talking
Fuck
about
me.
number 2 in returning production, Bowling Green. I gave you a gift.
Uh-huh.
Smile.
Alex has turned into some scary gangster. No. I don't have Bowling Green is
Number
going to
2.
do. Bowling Green is going to do what?
I'm just saying. All right. Let's
This is
let's
where
not
you
say-
realize-
All right.
This is where you realize that, buddy, you may have a third ownership in this puppy, but you are just talent. As far as
Steven.
What?
Steven. Yeah,
you
Steven.
don't call the shots,
Steven,
baby.
you're being. I'm ordering you to talk about Bowling Green's prospects of at least making a bowl this year.
No. I'm not refusing. I'm just saying, like, no, like that doesn't exist in this earth, on this plane of relevance.
Okay.
What?
Bowling Green
I don't know,
improved a little
motherfucker.
bit.
Tell me about UConn going to a fucking New Year's Six
Right.
bowl. Like,
Bowling
what?
Green,
What?
Bowling Green is number 2 in returning production this year. In all
Okay.
seriousness,
Cool. Cool.
that is viable, and they got kind of quietly better last year under a coach
What?
who we will only refer to as Tom Brady's former offensive coordinator.
Oh God. You're just
I
too
don't know.
young. You're too young to have really experienced the Loefflering.
No, I do think that, and you should talk. I don't know if you'll have any questions about this on your gossip show that you're going to
This
record with
fucker
Richard,
is-
but
Scott Loeffler.
I do
is-
think that it's probably bowl or time to change coaches there at Bowling Green, so that could be one to watch.
Yes.
With as far as
Got
so
their QB
mine is
back.
Buffalo. Mine is Buffalo.
You gave
thank
him
God.
Buffalo, and
Yeah,
you
it's
gave
more
me
interesting.
fucking
Buffalo,
Bowling Green.
Buffalo is actually a
Mine
lot
is-
more interesting. So let's talk about Buffalo.
Mine is thankfully Buffalo. If there is going to be anybody that worst to first in the MAC, which is crazy to think about Buffalo, given what they were
Yeah.
literally every year
Yes,
before
this
last
is the
year.
pick.
This is
Alex.
the one. You go look at the MAC recruiting rankings. Look, man, all it takes
They had the
in
best
MAC
signing class.
all it takes in the MAC is like 1 or 2 recruiting classes to just really get you a jump start. Mo Linguist in Buffalo did portal quite hard compared to the rest of the league. And I think it has the opportunity, obviously, to pay dividends. Now, they had holes to fill because Lance Leipold took some key contributors late last year when he left to go to Kansas in can't remember what month, but it definitely wasn't like January.
No,
May
it was
or
like June.
Yeah, it was late. Mo Linguist, who was the Michigan defensive coordinator at that time, did not coach a game for Michigan and ended up at Buffalo late on after Leipold left. This is Linguist's second year, first full cycle year, real full cycle year. Loaded up on transfers to an extent compared to the rest of the league. good recruiting class in general comes in this year. It might be a skosh too early for them to hit the rocket, but if they do stack another impressive MAC recruiting class on that, I think it's all systems go yet again at Buffalo, back to where they have been used to being the last few years.
It was just a lot of players in, a lot of players out. Their quarterback of the last few years, Kyle Ventrese, plays for Georgia Southern now, which actually might be the best indication that Georgia Southern is not going to be looking like Georgia Southern used to look, because Ventrese is not that kind of quarterback. Also, this is the thing that I wonder about Buffalo and like kind of the long-term project there. Linguist was on various staffs. He was like the Florida and Georgia guy as well as the defensive schemer. Can you convince Floridians and Georgians at some point to come to Buffalo?
I don't think that's going to be the plan.
No. But it's like, can you get a few? Because like you've seen, here's the classic example of this. You can win the MAC if you get one incredible athlete from Florida to go and play for you. See Central Michigan, Butch Jones, Antonio Brown. You can do it.
Well, remember,
That's
there are
maybe not
risks.
the best case study.
Yeah, that is not the best one to use, but I do understand what you're saying.
It's illustrative.
I do understand. Yes.
I'm not
yes.
being a
I
character
understand the
advocate.
sentiment.
I'm not being a character advocate. Thank you.
Sometimes his Steelers fandom is just like impossible to beat down.
I think Buffalo is the best pick here, and I did kind of order us around, and I do apologize, fellas, but I'm wondering about Western Michigan a little bit. Obviously, you know,
So is Western Michigan.
yeah. So walk that out for me then. To explain what they're because it has been. This will be the sixth year since they had the magical PJ Fleck season that got him the Minnesota job.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Lester was basically 6-6-ish for the first couple. Then 4-2 in 2020, 8-5 last year. They've been fine, and they even beat the eventual ACC champ Pitt last year.
Mm-hmm.
But you hear almost no buzz about them whatsoever, like none. And they lost a ton of players after last year. So what do you make of this?
They lost a lot of talent, which is why I don't think we're going to have a conversation about them this year. Like, people probably know Sky Moore, but they are the one thing they kind of like. It seems like
and their quarterback,
yes,
Caleb Ellaby.
I think they kind of distilled it down from the Fleck era, which is just like, go get playmakers specifically at the receiver position and just force feed them. That's what all the coaches were telling me this spring. Just like, they're going to find a guy like Sky Moore. They're going to get him the ball, and they are going to, like you just said, Alex, find the one player that's better than most of the MAC and push it. I was told that they are leaning a little more towards the portal than in years past, and not as much in high schools. I don't know how that works in the long term for a program like that, but we will not hear really much from them this year just because of the turnover.
The other directional Michigan that we have not talked about, and it wouldn't be a huge bounce back because they've just kind of settled in the middle, is Eastern. Chris Creighton's been there forever now, and he's a name that comes up periodically when like people are asking questions about would he be a candidate for a Big Ten job.
Yeah.
The fact that Eastern has settled into a place of being like fine in the MAC is one of the really good coaching accomplishments of the last long time for them. 3 bowls in the last 4 years for them. The only one that they didn't go being 2020. I don't know that they are the same upside play as Western because historically they've just not had the kind of athlete that Western has been able to find. Not, I wouldn't say historically, but for the last 8 years. I don't know. They got a transfer quarterback in from Troy.
This is one of those stories where
like they could be an upside play this year. But it's just like they've been very, very stagnant, but in a good way for a long time. I don't know. It seems to me like they could potentially be an upside play because of the returning production on offense.
Yes, it is possible. One of the hardest jobs in the G5 to sustain talent. So the longer he's able to build consistency, the better off they're going to be in the long, long term, because this historically was the doormat.
It has been Richard Johnson, Stephen Godfrey. That was kind of a big, beefy preview of a couple of conferences that span from Piscataway to Los Angeles and from Buffalo to Kalamazoo.
From sea to shining sea.
From Buffalo to Kalamazoo. From sea to shining sea.
From lake to shining lake.
I think the next time we talk on this podcast feed, college football will be being played. It will have already been played.